My brother is the most in-demand wedding DJ in the city. I found his hidden audio files. He secretly records all the drunken reception speeches for blackmail. The cursor blinked on the screen, a tiny rhythmic pulse in the cavernous silence of Julian's apartment. Outside, the city was a smear of gold and white lights, a glittering promise 20 stories below. But in here, the only light was the cold blue glow of the monitor painting my face. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I'd been here for hours, supposedly doing him a favor, sorting through the chaotic maze of his music library, a digital labyrinth of terabytes filled with every version of Don't Stop Believin' a person could ever imagine. He'd tossed me his keys this morning with a blinding smile. "You're a lifesaver, Leo. I'm triple booked this weekend. Just get the new stuff cataloged. Pizza's on me." It was typical Julian. Effortlessly cool, impossibly busy, and always making me feel like the helpful, slightly less shiny younger brother. The folder wasn't supposed to be there. It was buried deep, nested inside a backup system folder, inside another one cryptically labeled Venue Acoustics. I only clicked on it out of sheer dumb curiosity. The folder itself was just named Recordings, innocuous enough, but inside, the file names were anything but. They were methodical, chillingly organized. Each file started with a date, followed by a venue name, then the conjoined last names of a couple, and ended with a simple, terrifying tag: MOH, FOB, BM, Maid of Honor, Father of the Bride, Best Man. My blood went cold. I recognized some of the names. The Vanderbilts, who had that lavish wedding at the plaza last fall that was all over the society pages. The DiNardos, whose daughter married that tech CEO. Julian had DJ'd all of them. My hand trembled as I moved the mouse. I clicked on one from a month ago. 051224 Brooklyn Boathouse, Chen Miller, BM. I knew this wedding. Julian complained for a week about the groom's finance bro friends. The audio crackled to life, not with music, but with the ambient sound of a party in full swing. The gentle clinking of glasses, a distant laugh, the low murmur of 100 private conversations. Then a voice, amplified and slightly slurring, cut through the noise. It was the best man. He started with the usual cliches, how he'd known the groom from college, the dumb pranks, the endless nights studying. But then the speech took a turn. The bourbon in his voice was thick as he started talking about a secret investment club he and the groom had started. He was laughing, this deep, wet chuckle, as he detailed how they'd used insider information from the bride's father's company to make a fortune. He called it their real wedding gift. He was bragging to a room full of people about committing a felony. A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just embarrassing. This was life-ruining. I slammed the spacebar, cutting the man's drunken laughter short. The silence that rushed back in was heavier, more menacing than before. This couldn't be real. Julian, my brother, the guy who made people dance, who created the most joyful nights of their lives, was doing this? He wasn't just capturing a memory. He was bottling poison. I scrolled through the list. There were hundreds of files, stretching back years. A library of secrets. A catalog of ruin. Each file was a tiny digital hand grenade just waiting for Julian to pull the pin. For what? Money? Power? The thought made my stomach clench. The image I had of my brother, charming, talented, the golden child, was fracturing, cracking apart right in front of me. I was staring into the abyss of who he really was, and I was terrified of what was staring back. Just then, I heard it, the faint, metallic scrape of a key in the front door lock. Julian was home. My blood turned to ice. Every muscle in my body locked up. The sound of the deadbolt sliding back was like a gunshot in the silent apartment. My fingers, clumsy and numb, flew across the trackpad. I clicked frantically, closing the audio player, navigating out of the recordings folder, back through the maze of cryptic system files until I was looking at a screen full of MP3s again. Journey, separate ways, worlds apart. Journey, wheel in the sky. My breath was a ragged, shallow thing in my chest. The door swung open, spilling the warm yellow light from the hallway into the room. I forced my shoulders to relax, tried to arrange my face into something resembling normal. "Hey, man, burning the midnight oil?" Julian's voice was smooth, tired, but still carrying that effortless charisma. He dropped a heavy-looking duffel bag by the door, the scent of stale champagne and something vaguely like burnt sugar wafting off him. He ran a hand through his perfectly messy dark hair, the same hair we both had, though it always looked better on him. He looked like a rock star coming off stage, all cool confidence and weary satisfaction. He looked like my brother. He didn't look like a monster. The cognitive dissonance was so strong it made me dizzy. I swallowed, my throat feeling like it was coated in sand. "Hey, yeah, just trying to get through this last batch of remixes," I said, my voice sounding thin and reedy to my own ears. I gestured vaguely at the screen, hoping the gesture looked casual, busy. "How was the gig?" I prayed he wouldn't come closer, wouldn't look at the screen history, wouldn't see the guilt I was sure was written all over my face in glowing neon. He shrugged out of his jacket, tossing it onto the back of his leather couch. "You know, the usual," he said with a half-smile. "Bride cried during the father-daughter dance. The best man got way too friendly with the open bar. Standard stuff." He walked towards the kitchen, which was part of the same open-plan room, and started pulling a bottle of water from the fridge. My eyes were glued to his back. The best man got way too friendly with the open bar. The phrase echoed in my head, a direct parallel to the audio file I'd just heard. Was he talking about tonight? Was he in the other room right now uploading a new file, a new piece of ammunition to his secret arsenal? The casualness of his comment was a punch to the gut. This was just a game to him. These were just nights at the office. "Actually," he said, turning around and leaning against the kitchen counter, twisting the cap off his water, "the best man tonight was a real piece of work. Gave this toast, you wouldn't believe it. Went on and on about some shady real estate deal he and the groom pulled in their 20s, in front of the bride's father, who happens to be a district attorney." He took a long drink of water, a small, knowing smirk playing on his lips. Some people have no filter. My heart hammered against my ribs. He was telling me. He was literally telling me what he was doing, dressing it up as a funny anecdote. He was testing me, or maybe he was just so arrogant he didn't even see the danger. I couldn't breathe. I had to get out of there. The air in the apartment felt thick, suffocating. I started gathering my things, shoving my laptop into my bag with more force than necessary. "Wow, that's crazy," I managed to choke out. "Listen, I should probably head out. It's getting late, and I've got that early meeting tomorrow." I didn't have an early meeting. I just knew that if I stayed in that room with him for one more second, I was either going to throw up or scream. Julian's smile didn't falter. "Yeah, no problem, man. Hey, thanks again for this. Seriously, you're a lifesaver." He walked over and gave my shoulder a familiar, friendly squeeze. His touch felt like a brand. I flinched, almost imperceptibly, but he didn't seem to notice. He was already looking back at his computer, at the glowing screen that held his entire dark enterprise. "Just leave it on," he said. "I've got a few things to upload before I crash." My stomach dropped to the floor. I nodded mutely, slung my bag over my shoulder, and practically fled, mumbling a "see you later" over my shoulder. The click of the door closing behind me was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. I didn't wait for the elevator. I took the stairs, all 20 flights, needing the burn in my legs to distract from the roaring in my head. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face, sharp and smelling of rain and exhaust fumes. I stumbled out of the lobby doors and just started walking. Not toward the subway, not toward my apartment, just away. My legs were still shaking from the sprint down the stairs, and my lungs burned with every ragged breath. The city was a blur of neon and headlights. Cars hissed by on the wet pavement. I could feel the rumble of a distant train through the soles of my shoes. But all of it was muffled, like I was underwater, drowned out by the echo of Julian's voice in my head. I've got a few things to upload before I crash. The words were so mundane, so ordinary, the kind of thing you'd say about finishing up a work email or posting photos to social media. But I knew what he was uploading. He was archiving another person's ruin. I shoved my hands in my pockets, my knuckles scraping against my keys. I kept replaying the scene in the apartment, the way he leaned against the counter, the smirk on his face as he talked about the best man. He wasn't just telling a story, he was boasting. He was proud of it. The sheer arrogance of it was what really got to me. It wasn't just a dirty little secret he was ashamed of. It was a source of amusement, of power. He was dangling it right in front of me, this horrifying truth, dressing it up as a joke. Did he suspect I knew? Was that a test? Or was he so confident, so certain of his charm and my loyalty, that he didn't even consider the possibility that I would see it for what it was? The squeeze on my shoulder, his casual, friendly touch, it felt like a violation now, a way of marking his territory, of reminding me that we were brothers, that I was on his side. My mind raced, trying to connect dots that I never even knew existed. All those times Julian had helped out a friend with a loan they couldn't possibly pay back. The way certain people in his circle seemed almost afraid of him, their smiles a little too tight, their laughter a little too loud whenever he was around. I had always written it off as charisma, as the kind of magnetic pull that successful people have. Now, I saw it in a sick, new light. It wasn't magnetism, it was leverage. He wasn't a DJ. He was a collector. He collected secrets, weaknesses, moments of alcohol-fueled stupidity, and he kept them locked away on that hard drive. For what? Was he actively blackmailing these people? Or did he just like knowing that he could, that he held the power to detonate a dozen lives with a few clicks of his mouse? I didn't know which was worse. I found myself in a part of town I didn't recognize, standing under a flickering street lamp that cast long, distorted shadows on the sidewalk. I thought about our childhood. I remembered one time when I was maybe 10, and I'd accidentally broken our dad's favorite vinyl record, a rare pressing of a jazz album he loved. I was terrified, convinced I was going to be grounded for life. Julian, who was 15, found me crying in our room. He didn't say a word. He just took the shattered pieces of the record, and the next day, he took the blame. He told our dad he'd dropped it while cleaning. He took 2 weeks of punishment for me without a single complaint. He was my hero. He was the one who protected me, who stood between me and the world. How could that person, that brother, be the same man who was now preying on the worst moments of other people's lives? The memory didn't comfort me. It just made the betrayal feel sharper, deeper, like a shard of glass working its way into my heart. I finally hailed a cab, the yellow car a beacon in the dark, and slumped into the back seat. The driver didn't say anything, just looked at me in the rearview mirror as I gave him my address. As we drove, I knew one thing with a cold, terrifying certainty. I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen or unhear what I'd heard. This knowledge was a poison, and it was already in my system. Just knowing about it made me complicit. If I did nothing, I was just another one of the people enabling him, another person smiling too tightly in his presence. I had to do something. But what? I had no proof, nothing but a memory of a file directory and a chilling conversation. I needed to get back on that hard drive. I needed a copy. The thought sent a fresh jolt of fear through me, so intense it was almost nauseating. He just told me he was uploading new files. He was at his computer right now. But I had to try. I had to get back in. My own apartment felt cold and alien when I finally got home. I locked the deadbolt and leaned against the door, my whole body trembling. The life I thought I had, the brother I thought I knew, it was all gone. And in its place was a dangerous secret that was now mine to carry. Sleep didn't come. I don't think I even tried. I just sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, my bag still slung over my shoulder, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant wail of a siren. Every time a car passed on the street below, its headlights would sweep across my wall, a fleeting moment of illumination that made the shadows seem deeper when it was gone. My apartment, my sanctuary, felt like a stranger's house. The pictures on the wall, the books on the shelf, the familiar worn spot on the rug, it all belonged to a person who no longer existed. A person who had a brother he looked up to, a person who didn't know the world could be this ugly. I kept seeing the file names scrolling behind my eyelids. They weren't just labels, they were people. Richardson, MOH affair. Patel, groomsman confession. Miller, best man DUI. I wondered about them. Did the maid of honor, Richardson, get married herself? Did she have kids? Did she wake up every morning in a cold sweat wondering if this was the day her life would implode? Did the best man, Miller, get help? Or did he just live with the quiet terror that my brother held the key to his career, his freedom? I finally got up and walked over to my desk, pulling out an old shoebox filled with photos. My fingers trembled as I sifted through them, past faded Polaroids of family vacations and awkward school pictures. I found the one I was looking for, Julian and me, at the lake house. I must have been 8, he was 13. He had his arm around my shoulder, pulling me into a headlock, but he was grinning, and I was laughing so hard my eyes were squeezed shut. He just taught me how to skip stones, spending a whole afternoon patiently showing me how to flick my wrist, celebrating like I'd won an Olympic medal the first time I got one to bounce more than twice. I stared at the face of the boy in that photo, the hero who took the blame for a broken record, the protector who taught me how to swim and how to stand up to bullies. I tried to find a hint of the man I'd seen tonight in his eyes, a flicker of the cold, calculating cruelty. There was nothing. Just a kid. My big brother. A wave of nausea rolled over me, so strong I had to brace myself against the desk. The betrayal wasn't just about what he was doing, it was that he had somehow murdered the person I thought he was, and I hadn't even known he was gone. The first hint of dawn was starting to gray the sky outside my window. The city was stirring, the first garbage trucks rumbling down the street, and with the light came a sliver of cold, hard clarity. Pacing my apartment and agonizing over old photos wasn't going to change anything. I had to get that data. It was the only way. Confronting him would be useless. He'd just lie, charm his way out of it, and then I'd be the enemy. He'd lock me out and those files would stay there forever, a collection of digital time bombs. I needed proof, irrefutable, undeniable proof. I needed a copy of everything. My mind started to work, sluggishly at first, then with a frantic energy. I had a key to his apartment. He'd given it to me years ago for emergencies. He trusted me. The thought was like a punch to the gut, but I pushed the guilt down. Trust was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. I just needed a window, a time when I knew for certain he wouldn't be there. He traveled a lot for gigs, especially the high-end ones. He'd mentioned one coming up, a big destination wedding. When was it? My heart hammered against my ribs as I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to unlock it. I scrolled to Julian's contact, his smiling face looking back at me from the screen. I had to seem normal, casual. I typed out a message, my thumb hovering over the send button. "Hey man, crazy idea," I wrote. "Remember you mentioned that wedding in Napa? I was thinking of taking a long weekend myself around then. Might be cool to fly out to the same area if the timing works. When is it again?" It felt clumsy, transparent. Would he see through it? Would he sense the terror thrumming just beneath the surface of the words? I squeezed my eyes shut and hit send. The little delivered receipt appeared almost instantly. I tossed the phone onto my bed as if it were hot, my breath held tight in my chest. For 5 minutes, there was nothing. It was the longest 5 minutes of my life. I imagined him reading it, a slow smile spreading across his face as he realized what I was up to. Then my phone buzzed. I snatched it up. A message from Julian. "Dude, that'd be awesome. It's next weekend. Flying out Friday morning, back late Sunday. The wedding is Saturday. We could totally hang Sunday before I fly back. Let me know." It was followed by a thumbs up emoji. The casual, friendly response was more chilling than any accusation. He suspected nothing. He was inviting me in. I had my window. Friday to Sunday, he would be 2,000 miles away, and I would be going back into that apartment, not to help him, but to ruin him. I had my window. The words echoed in my head for the next 4 days, a mantra of dread and determination. The friendly text message from my brother felt like a trap, a piece of cheese left out for a mouse who already knows the spring is loaded. The days leading up to that Friday were a blur of muted panic. I went to work, sat in meetings, nodded along as my boss talked about quarterly goals, and all I could think about was the file structure on a hard drive 2 miles away. I was a ghost haunting my own life. Food tasted like cardboard, sleep came in jagged 30-minute increments, always ending with me bolting upright in the dark, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I felt like I was wearing a mask, and at any moment, someone, a coworker, the guy at the coffee shop, a stranger on the subway, would look me in the eye and see right through it. They'd see the lie. They'd see the thief I was about to become. On Wednesday, I walked into an electronics store on my lunch break. The air was cold and smelled of new plastic. I wandered the aisles, feeling like an imposter. I needed an external hard drive, one with enough space to hold a man's entire library of secrets. I picked one up, a sleek black rectangle, small enough to fit in my pocket. It felt impossibly heavy in my hand, dense with the weight of what I was planning to do. At the checkout, the cashier made small talk. "Big project?" he asked, scanning the box. I managed a tight smile and a nod. "Something like that," I mumbled, my voice sounding distant and strange to my own ears. I paid in cash, the crumpled bills feeling dirty in my hand. Walking out of the store and into the bright afternoon sun, I clutched the bag like it contained a bomb. In a way, it did. Friday morning arrived, gray and drizzling. I hadn't slept at all. I just lay in bed watching the clock on my phone tick over, each minute an eternity. At 8:15 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a picture from Julian. A selfie of him in a first-class airplane seat, gritting, holding up a glass of orange juice. The caption read, "Napa bound. Time to make some memories. See you Sunday, bro." The casual cruelty of it, the sheer normalcy knocked the wind out of me. He was living his life, flying across the country to do his job, a job that was built on a foundation of extortion and fear, and he was smiling about it. He was thinking of me as his little brother, completely oblivious. The picture was the final push I needed. The guilt that had been gnawing at me was burned away by a hot flash of anger. He wasn't my brother, not anymore. It took me another hour to actually leave my apartment. I paced the length of my living room, the new hard drive in my jacket pocket, its sharp corner digging into my hip. This was it, the point of no return. Once I walked out that door, everything would change. I was no longer just the person who knew the secret. I was becoming an active participant. I was crossing a line, and there was no telling what was on the other side. Finally, I took a deep, shuddering breath and walked out, not bothering to lock the door behind me. The walk to his building was the longest 10 blocks of my life. The city noise seemed amplified, the rain slicking the pavement and reflecting the bleak sky. Every person I passed felt like a potential witness. I kept my head down, my hands jammed in my pockets, one of them wrapped tightly around the cold, familiar shape of his apartment key. Standing in the hallway outside his door was surreal. I'd stood here 100 times before, ready for a game night, a movie, or just to hang out. It had always felt like a second home. Now it felt like the entrance to a vault. The air in the hall was still and smelled faintly of the carpet cleaner the building used. I could hear the muffled sound of a television from a neighboring apartment. I pulled out the key. My hand was shaking so much it took 2 tries to get it into the lock. I paused, my ear pressed against the cold wood of the door, listening. Nothing. Just silence. I turned the key. The click of the deadbolt sliding back sounded like a gunshot in the quiet hall. I pushed the door open and slipped inside, my heart hammering against my sternum. The silence in the apartment was absolute. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the heavy, breathless silence of a vacuum. The air felt thick, charged with what I was about to do. I closed the door behind me, the latch catching with a soft, final thud. I was in. I had my window. The words echoed in my head for the next 4 days, a mantra of dread and determination. The friendly text message from my brother felt like a trap, a piece of cheese left out for a mouse who already knows the spring is loaded. The days leading up to that Friday were a blur of muted panic. I went to work, sat in meetings, nodded along as my boss talked about quarterly goals, and all I could think about was the file structure on a hard drive 2 miles away. I was a ghost, haunting my own life. Food tasted like cardboard. Sleep came in jagged, 30-minute increments, always ending with me bolting upright in the dark, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I felt like I was wearing a mask, and at any moment, someone, a coworker, the guy at the coffee shop, a stranger on the subway, would look me in the eye and see right through it. They'd see the lie. They'd see the thief I was about to become. On Wednesday, I walked into an electronics store on my lunch break. The air was cold and smelled of new plastic. I wandered the aisles feeling like an imposter. I needed an external hard drive, one with enough space to hold a man's entire library of secrets. I picked one up, a sleek black rectangle, small enough to fit in my pocket. It felt impossibly heavy in my hand, dense with the weight of what I was planning to do. At the checkout, the cashier made small talk. "Big project?" he asked, scanning the box. I managed a tight smile and a nod. "Something like that," I mumbled, my voice sounding distant and strange to my own ears. I paid in cash, the crumpled bills feeling dirty in my hand. Walking out of the store and into the bright afternoon sun, I clutched the bag like it contained a bomb. In a way, it did. Friday morning arrived, gray and drizzling. I hadn't slept at all. I just lay in bed watching the clock on my phone tick over, each minute an eternity. At 8:15 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a picture from Julian, a selfie of him in a first-class airplane seat, grinning, holding up a glass of orange juice. The caption read, "Napa bound. Time to make some memories. See you Sunday, bro." The casual cruelty of it, the sheer normalcy, knocked the wind out of me. He was living his life, flying across the country to do his job, a job that was built on a foundation of extortion and fear, and he was smiling about it. He was thinking of me as his little brother, completely oblivious. The picture was the final push I needed. The guilt that had been gnawing at me was burned away by a hot flash of anger. He wasn't my brother. Not anymore. It took me another hour to actually leave my apartment. I paced the length of my living room, the new external hard drive in my jacket pocket, its sharp corner digging into my hip. This was it, the point of no return. Once I walked out that door, everything would change. I was no longer just the person who knew the secret. I was becoming an active participant. I was crossing a line, and there was no telling what was on the other side. Finally, I took a deep, shuddering breath and walked out, not bothering to lock the door behind me. The walk to his building was the longest 10 blocks of my life. The city noise seemed amplified, the rain slicking the pavement and reflecting the bleak sky. Every person I passed felt like a potential witness. I kept my head down, my hands jammed in my pockets, one of them wrapped tightly around the cold, familiar shape of his apartment key. Standing in the hallway outside his door was surreal. I'd stood here 100 times before, ready for a game night, a movie, or just to hang out. It had always felt like a second home. Now it felt like the entrance to a vault. The air in the hall was still and smelled faintly of the carpet cleaner the building used. I could hear the muffled sound of a television from a neighboring apartment. I pulled out the key. My hand was shaking so much it took 2 tries to get it into the lock. I paused, my ear pressed against the cold wood of the door, listening. Nothing. Just silence. I turned to the key. The click of the deadbolt sliding back sounded like a gunshot in the quiet hall. I pushed the door open and slipped inside, my heart hammering against my sternum. The silence in the apartment was absolute. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the heavy, breathless silence of a vacuum. The air felt thick, charged with what I was about to do. I closed the door behind me, the latch catching with a soft final thud. I was in. For a moment, I just stood there in the entryway, letting my eyes adjust to the dim light filtering through the blinds. The apartment smelled like him, a mix of that expensive cologne he wore and the faint, clean scent of ozone from all his electronics. It was the smell of home, of safety, of 1,000 lazy Sunday afternoons spent on his couch. Now it smelled like a predator's den. Every familiar object seemed to mock me. The framed concert poster on the wall, one we'd gone to together, the row of worn sneakers by the door, one of his pairs right next to one of mine he'd borrowed and never given back. It was all a stage set, and I was seeing behind the curtain for the first time. The silence was the worst part. It pressed in on me, amplifying the sound of my own ragged breathing and the frantic thumping in my chest. I had to move. Standing still felt like waiting to be caught. I crept down the short hallway to his office. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, the hinges silent and smooth. Of course they were. Julian was meticulous. The room was exactly as I'd pictured it. Sleek, minimalist, and cold. A massive curved monitor sat on a dark wood desk, flanked by 2 studio-quality speakers. The computer tower, a black monolith with a soft blue power light, hummed quietly beneath it. This was the heart of the operation, the place where he stitched together his playlists and where he edited his secrets into weapons. On the desk, next to a neat stack of contracts, was a multi-bay hard drive enclosure, a digital filing cabinet. My target. My stomach twisted into a knot so tight it was hard to breathe. I walked over to the desk, my movements feeling slow and clumsy like I was wading through water. I pulled the small black external drive from my pocket. It felt cold and foreign in my palm. Plugging the USB cable into the back of his computer was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My fingers fumbled with the port, my hands shaking so badly I was afraid I'd drop the drive. A small chime sounded from the speakers as the computer recognized the new hardware. The sound was deafening in the silence. An icon for the drive popped up on the huge screen. I navigated with his mouse, the cursor seeming to tremble under my control. I opened the main drive enclosure. Inside were folders organized with chilling efficiency. Contracts, invoices, music, photos, and then one that made my blood run cold. It wasn't labeled blackmail or secrets. It was worse. It was labeled leverage. The casual, corporate cynicism of that single word hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a messy, emotional secret for him. It was a business asset. I clicked it open. My breath hitched. Inside were dozens, maybe hundreds of subfolders. Each one was labeled with a last name and a wedding date. Harrison_Chen 051122. Patel_Kowalski 090421. I recognized some of the names. People I'd met. People I'd smiled at, shared a drink with, watched them dance their first dance while my brother provided the soundtrack. I felt a wave of nausea. I dragged the entire leverage folder over to the icon for my external drive. A small window appeared, copying 472 items, and beneath it, a progress bar, a tiny sliver of blue that began to crawl across the screen at an agonizingly slow pace. Estimated time remaining, 23 minutes. It might as well have been a lifetime. I couldn't just stand there watching it. I would go insane. I started to pace the small office, a caged animal in a room that was suddenly shrinking around me. My eyes landed on a framed photo on his bookshelf. It was of the 2 of us, maybe 10 years ago, on a fishing trip with our dad. We were teenagers, grinning, holding up a pitifully small fish between us. Julian had his arm slung around my shoulder. He looked so proud, so happy. He looked like my brother. A lump formed in my throat, hot and painful. Who was that person? Was he ever real, or was this cold, calculating monster always lurking underneath, just waiting to get out? Was I stealing from the boy in that photo, or was I trying to save what was left of him? The progress bar was at 30%. I went back to the screen, unable to stay away. I had to see. I had to know for sure. My hand, slick with sweat, moved the mouse back to the leverage folder. I scrolled through the list of names, a grim directory of ruined moments. I stopped on one I knew well. WEBSTER_DAVIS 101520. Our family friends, the Websters. I'd been at that wedding. I remembered the bride's father, a kind, jovial man giving a beautiful speech. I clicked open the folder. There were 3 audio files inside. One was labeled FOB_official. The other 2 were labeled FOB_testimonial, take 1, and FOB_testimonial, take 2. I knew what testimonial meant. It was Julian's code. I clicked on take 1. The voice that came through the speakers was slurred, broken. It was Mr. Webster, but it was a version of him I'd never heard. He was crying, talking to someone he clearly thought was a friend, confessing that his business was on the verge of bankruptcy, that he'd borrowed against his house to pay for the wedding, that he felt like a complete failure. "Don't tell her," he sobbed. "Please, this is her day. Don't let her know." And underneath his desperate pleading, I could hear another voice, calm and reassuring. It was Julian. "Of course not, man," he was saying. "This is just between us." My blood turned to ice. I slammed the mouse down, stopping the playback. I felt sick. I was going to be sick. The progress bar was at 85%. Just a few more minutes. I forced myself to breathe. I scrolled to the bottom of the folder list, just wanting to get away from the Webster's name. And that's when I saw it. At the very end of the alphabetized list of couples, there was one last folder. It didn't have a date. It didn't have 2 names. It had 1. Leo. My name. The progress bar hit 99%. My heart stopped. I heard the faint scrape of a key in the apartment's front door. The world narrowed to the sound of the deadbolt sliding back. A metallic clack that echoed the frantic hammering in my own chest. In that split second, a dozen impossible scenarios flashed through my mind. Hiding under the desk, trying to climb out the window, pretending I'd just stopped by to say hello. They were all useless. My body was frozen, my gaze locked on the progress bar, which was now a solid, taunting line of blue. A soft chime, the kind of pleasant, unobtrusive sound that usually means an email has arrived, echoed from the speakers. Copy complete. I've never moved faster in my life. It was pure instinct, a jolt of adrenaline that bypassed thought entirely. My hand shot out, yanked the USB cable from the port, and shoved the small black drive deep into my jeans pocket. The warmth from my skin had made the plastic slick. I turned just as the office door swung fully open. And there was Julian. He wasn't holding a weapon. He wasn't yelling. He was just standing there in the doorway, his gym bag slung over one shoulder, holding a takeout container that was steaming gently into the air. He looked tired. He looked normal. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. His eyes took in the scene in an instant. Me standing by his desk, pale and breathing hard, the massive monitor behind me still displaying the contents of his leverage folder, the empty USB port on his computer. He didn't look angry, not at first. He looked disappointed, like a teacher who'd caught his favorite student cheating on a test. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, thick and suffocating. The only sound was the quiet hum of the computer and the distant wail of a siren somewhere out in the city. He set the takeout container and his gym bag down carefully on the floor, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't take his eyes off me. "Leo," he said, his voice quiet, almost gentle. It was the same voice he used on the phone with panicked brides, the same voice he'd used to soothe Mr. Webster. "What are you doing in here?" I couldn't find the words. My throat was a desert. All I could do was stare at him, this stranger wearing my brother's face. My hand instinctively went to my pocket, pressing against the hard rectangle of the drive. It was the only real thing in the room. His gaze followed the movement of my hand. A flicker of something cold and hard passed through his eyes. The mask was slipping. You shouldn't have done that, he said, still quiet, but the gentleness was gone, replaced with a flat, metallic edge. He walked past me and sat down in his expensive, ergonomic chair, his back to me for a moment as he looked at the screen. He clicked the mouse a few times, scrolling through the list of names. He wasn't frantic. He was taking inventory, assessing the damage. He let out a long, slow sigh, the sound of a man inconvenienced, not a man exposed. You know, he said, swiveling the chair around to face me, for a smart kid, you can be so incredibly naive. He leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head, the picture of calm. You think this is evil? This is just the world. It's currency, information. Everyone has a price, Leo. Everyone has a secret. I just found a way to make it work for me. Mr. Webster, I managed to choke out, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. I heard it, Julian. I heard him crying. He trusted you. They all trusted you. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, and it made my skin crawl. He got a 20% discount on his daughter's wedding package, a wedding he couldn't afford. In his heart, he knows he got a good deal. It was a transaction. He just doesn't like to think about the fine print. This casual cruelty, this complete lack of empathy, it finally broke the spell of fear that had held me paralyzed. A hot wave of fury washed over me. And what about the folder with my name on it? I asked, my voice shaking with a rage I didn't know I possessed. Was I a transaction too? Was I just more fine print? For the first time, he looked away. His eyes drifted to the framed photo on the bookshelf, the one of the two of us on the fishing trip. He stared at it for a long moment. That, he said, his voice dropping even lower, was insurance. He turned back to me, and his eyes were dark, unreadable pits. The night Dad died. You remember that night? You came to my apartment, you were a wreck. You drank half a bottle of my whiskey, and you told me everything. How you felt like you'd let him down, how you were terrified you were going to end up just like him, working a job you hated until it killed you, how you felt like a failure. Every word was a physical blow. I remembered that night. I remembered the safety I felt confessing my deepest fears to the one person on earth I thought I could trust. You recorded that? I whispered, horrified. I did, he said, without a trace of shame. You were spiraling, Leo. I was worried you'd do something stupid, throw your life away. It was to protect you. A reminder, if I ever needed to use it, of what you'd be throwing away. The lie was so grotesque, so perfectly twisted, that it almost made me laugh. Protecting me. He had taken my most vulnerable moment, my deepest grief, and filed it away as leverage. The boy in that photograph, the brother who had his arms slung around my shoulder, was a fiction. He had never existed. Or maybe I had killed him. I felt a strange and sudden calm settle over me. The rage and the fear receded, leaving behind a vast, cold emptiness. I looked at Julian, truly looked at him, and I saw nothing. Nothing but a predator who had built his kingdom on the ruins of other people's happiness. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked out of the office. I walked down the hallway, past the familiar smells and the shared memories that were now all tainted. He didn't try to stop me. As I reached the front door, I heard his voice one last time. Not angry, not pleading, but filled with a kind of chilling pity. It's a rough world out there, Leo. Be careful. I stepped out into the hallway and pulled the door shut behind me, the click of the latch sounding like a final, definitive end. I walked down the stairs and out into the cool night air, the city lights blurring through the tears I didn't realize I was crying. The drive in my pocket felt impossibly heavy, like it contained the weight of all those broken promises and whispered secrets. It was a weapon. A bomb that could incinerate my brother's entire life, his career, his reputation. But the fallout would be immense, hitting people like the Websters, people who were already victims. I could destroy it all, or I could let the monster I just left upstairs continue to walk freely among us. I have all of it. Every last secret. I can burn his life to the ground, but I might take a lot of innocent people with him. Or I can walk away, erase it all, and let him get away with everything. So I have to ask you, what would you do? Let us know in the comments.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. I post new stories every day.